Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kira and today's video is going to be jam-packed with all of the festive vibes. Not only will I be showing you how to color the most challenging elements in your coloring pages, but I'll also be sharing with you the details on how to enter my very first giveaway. When I first started this channel, I had no idea how much love and support I would receive from you all in the coloring community. I am seriously so grateful. So to say thank you for making my colorist dreams a reality, I'm teaming up with Arrtx to give away 2 sets of the new Simptap markers. This is the 36 set and 2 of you lucky people will be getting this for Christmas from me and Arrtx. I'll be using these markers throughout today's tutorial to show you how I like to use them in my coloring pages. And honestly, I think they are my new favorite Arrtx product. They're what I think is the perfect combination of their 3mm tip acrylic marker, which is super duper opaque, mixed with the flexibility of their brush tip sets. I personally have the 48 set, and while I love the current color range, I'm really excited for them to expand it further in the future to include more pastels. Because we all know how much I love using pastel acrylic markers to add those fun little highlights to my coloring pages. To activate these markers, all you need to do is give them a really good shake, take off the cap off the back of the marker, and press that button around 4 to 5 times. You do not want to overpress. And this is how you saturate the tip with ink. And then once that's done, you're all good to use them. So if you like how I use these markers throughout the tutorial and want to enter the giveaway, all you need to do is number 1, be subscribed to the channel. 2, like this video. And step number 3 is to comment what videos you'd like to see from me in 2025, as well as your Instagram handle so I can contact you if you're one of the lucky winners. And also let me know which country you're from, because I'm going to have 1 winner from Australia and 1 international winner. I really wanted to make sure that one of my Australian followers gets the chance to win one of these sets, because I feel like we often get left out of giveaways down here in Australia because we're so far away from the rest of the world. And then the winners will be randomly selected and announced on my Instagram stories at 8 PM Australian Eastern Standard Time on the 13th of December. So you have 1 week to enter, so get on it if you want a chance to win. And I'll only be contacting you through my Instagram account, which is @apicturedpurpose. And I would never ask for any sort of payment or anything like that. So just be wary, because this is my first giveaway. I want everything to go as smoothly as possible. All right, now that we've got all those details out of the way, let's chat about Christmas coloring. A couple of weeks ago, I asked my subscribers and Instagram followers what they struggle with most when it comes to their Christmas coloring pages. And the most common responses I received were Christmas trees, baubles, presents, and snow. I'm going to leave snow for a completely separate dedicated video. That'll either be my next one or the next upload after that. But all those other elements, I'm going to show you how I approach coloring them today. And we're going to be doing it in the coloring book Johanna's Christmas by Johanna Basford. Now, I really struggled trying to find a coloring page that included all the elements that I wanted to show you how to color. I didn't end up finding one, so what I did was actually just create my own. So we're going to be coloring this page here. This is my color inspiration for the page. I'm definitely going to be using more colors than this, but this is kind of a nice starting point. And I really wanted to color this page because it's got so many presents on it, lots of bows, but it didn't have obviously any Christmas tree elements or baubles. So I added these Christmas trees in myself along with the ornaments. So if you wanna follow along with me in this video, feel free to add your own Christmas trees in, but I did just wanna add in some Christmas trees so you can see how I approach coloring them, and then you can use that approach for other Christmas tree coloring pages. Now the first thing I'm gonna do, which I'm very excited about, is use an alcohol marker base, because this is basically a single-sided book, because you've just got these like sort of faded pages on the other sides, which I'm sacrificing. I'll never color those. I would much rather be able to to use my alcohol markers, and I'm also going to create some light sources in this page as well because I know a lot of you were asking for that. So I'm going to use my light yellow alcohol markers to create my light sources and then base the rest of the page with the rest of the colors. So for anyone new to my channel, I'm a huge fan of basing my coloring pages. My go-to medium for basing is alcohol markers because of their vibrant colors and just how satisfying they are to work with. That said, I only use them in single-sided coloring books to avoid bleeding through to the opposite page. So for double-sided pages, I love using watercolor pencils. And in the future, I really want to try basing with soft pastels and watercolor paints to see how the results compare. But anyway, one of the main reasons I love basing is that it helps me plan where each color will go on the page. So by the time I get to the shading stage with my colored pencils, I don't have to worry about choosing colors. I can focus solely on shading, which makes the process faster and more enjoyable. As for the alcohol markers I'm using here, I'm not being super precise, so you might notice some streakiness. If I was solely coloring with alcohol markers for this page, I'd use techniques to avoid this issue, but since this is just the base layer, I'm not too worried. I know I can smooth everything out later with my colored pencils. The format of this tutorial will be the same as my other color along videos on the channel. I won't be filming every single part of the page on camera, otherwise we'd be here for who knows how long, but I'll walk you through how to color most of the key elements and share all of my color combinations. That way you'll have everything you need to confidently finish the rest of this page or apply these techniques to any other Christmas coloring page you're working on after watching. Now, if you've got any plain presents in your Christmas coloring pages, I highly recommend trying your hand at adding your own patterns to the quote-unquote wrapping paper. I recently did a tutorial on alcohol marker patterns and textures, so feel free to check that out if you need a little extra help, but I love adding these personalized touches to my pages. It makes the coloring feel like my own creation and almost like I'm collaborating with the illustrator. Yeah, I know, a weird analogy, but hopefully you get what I mean. It's also best to add patterns before pencil shading. You want the shadows to sit on top of the patterns and not the other way around to mimic how light and shadow work in real life. For this page, I've used alcohol markers and colored fine liners to create a few wrapping paper patterns. However, if you're working in a double-sided book, water-based markers are a great alternative to prevent bleed through. Now, I know it's a bit hard to see what I'm doing here. I'll show you a close-up in a second, but what I'm doing is adding little pink stripes to my candy canes using a fine liner. Details like this might seem tiny and almost unnoticeable in the final piece, but when all these little touches come together, they really help create a beautifully detailed page. So what I've gone and done off camera is just colored this tree here, as you can see, to figure out my color combinations and techniques. And I'll show you how to do all of this over on this tree here. I do think the Christmas tree is looking a little bit boring right now, but that is intentional because at the end, I'm gonna go in with my Simptap markers, either add some snowy effects or glittery, sparkly effects. Or maybe I'll do both. I'm not sure right now. When it comes to shading Christmas trees, there are sort of two ways you can approach it. You can either have the shadow color coming from the top down, or you can have the shadow color at the tips of each layer here and then go lighter on the way up. But in my head, it makes the most sense to go shadow to light. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. When it comes to coloring Christmas trees, I like to keep things fairly simple, as you'll see me doing here. Of course, your approach might vary depending on the illustrator's style. If the tree doesn't have clearly defined layers in the artwork, I personally prefer to add my own. It's just a touch that really helps me achieve the look that I like. Once I finished my base layer of shading, I go over the added Christmas lights with a light yellow pencil to blend the light sources more seamlessly into the green of the tree. After that, I add flicks of pencil strokes to create texture. If the flicks look a little too stark against your base shading, you can always use a colorless blender pencil to soften them. Personally, I rely on the Prismacolor blender pencil throughout this tutorial, especially when I've used too heavy of a hand with my darker pencil shades. Ornaments, on the other hand, can be a little bit tricky, especially when they're tiny. If the ornaments are very small, I'd recommend sticking to a single highlight on your baubles. However, if space does allow, I like to include 2 highlights. It really helps create the illusion of a rounded spherical shape. Throughout this tutorial, for some of the smaller elements I'm colouring on screen, you'll notice I've included a list of the colour combinations in the top left corner. These are shown in order from the lightest pencil shade to the darkest. So when it comes to shading my bows, I really like to create a spherical dimension, and I do that by keeping the highlight in the center. So what I do, I shade just near the little knot here, as well as the outside of the bow. And then I'll also do the same for the longer ribbon tail pieces. So I won't do it for this one, but I'll do the shadow here and the shadow here for this tail. And then also the same as, I don't know what this section of the bow you want to call it, but the one that wraps around the present, you want to do the shadow closest to the actual bow part, and then at the edge of the present as well. A technique I've been using for a little while now with my Prismacolors, and you'll probably notice it as you watch this video, is that instead of finishing with blending out the colors using the lightest shade in my combo, I go back in with the initial shadow color, or sometimes even a darker shade, to deepen the shadows further. I'm someone who likes to color over the shadow areas with the highlight color to really blend everything together. However, with Prismacolors, since they're so soft and pigmented, this can lighten the original shadow color. So by going back in at the end with either the same shadow color or an even darker pencil, I can bring back the depth that sometimes gets diminished when blending with lighter shades. So here are the rest of the bows on the page completed using the exact same method I demonstrated earlier. And just like last time, I've included the color combinations in the top corner for anyone following along with their own set of Prismacolors at home. Okay, now that we've got all the bows on the page all done, we are now going to go ahead and shade the presents. Presents can definitely be a little bit tricky, but how I like to approach it, I shade the corners of the present, and then if there's anything overlapping, I'll shade the shadow of that as well. So for presents that have different colors on them, like this one here, I'll use a dark yellow or brown color to shade here, and then a purple here. So we're kind of creating the shadow, but with the color that is within that pattern, if that makes sense. You'll see as I'm coloring each present, I'm probably not going to color every single present on camera, but I'll color a majority of them, so you get the gist of how I color presents. As past Kira just mentioned, I won't be colouring every single present on camera, but I will be colouring one from each colour combo so you can easily replicate the same look on the other presents with the same base colour. I also talked about shading the edges and areas where presents or objects overlap, but you'll notice I didn't stick to this as a hard and fast rule. As I worked on the presents, I found myself unconsciously shading as though there was a light source in the top right corner of the page, rather than shading solely around the edges and overlaps. And unsurprisingly, this approach ended up looking much more effective and cohesive. This kind of shift often happens to me when I'm colouring. I might start with one plan, but as I get into the flow, my process evolves and takes on a life of its own. Letting my intuition guide me and not overthinking every decision is when my best work happens. So I really encourage you not to stress too much about shading. I know it's a tricky thing to master, but with practice, you'll find that your shadows start to fall into place more naturally. I'm planning to do a dedicated video on shading next year, but for now, just do your best and keep experimenting. If you're looking for a quick trick to check how your shading is working, try taking a photo of your page and applying a black and white filter. This removes the distraction of color and lets you focus purely on the effectiveness of your shadows. It's a simple but helpful way to gauge your process. Alright, so this is how the presents are looking once they're all shaded with my Prismacolors. I definitely think I need to do some shading behind the presents over the Christmas tree. I'm gonna worry about that though until after I've done the background so that I can do it back here and stuff like that. But what I want to first do is show you how to color this little holly plant here like I've done down here, as well as how to color the gift tags. Now, I know a sleigh wasn't most frequently asked for a tutorial on, but I thought I might as well do it since it's a part of this page, and I think 1 or 2 people asked for a tutorial on a sleigh, so I'm just going to quickly show you how I approach it. For this part here, which I'm gonna say is kind of the metal gold part of the sleigh, I really want to focus on having the highlight in the center here and having the shadows on either side so it can create that round spherical effect. And then for the sleigh down here, I'm going to do the usual shading that you would have underneath the gold parts of the sleigh. I don't know how to describe it. As well as I'm going to do a bit of shading underneath the swirls as well, because I want to go over the top with the Simptap markers on the swirls, and I want them to have a bit of a 3D effect. So putting the shading underneath the swirls is going to help with that. The way I'm shading what I'm calling the gold metal parts of the sleigh is a perfect example of the technique I mentioned earlier when coloring the bows. I start with a light brown pencil for the base, layer on a mid-tone and highlight color, and then finish by going back in with an even darker brown than I started with to really enhance the shadows. This technique has quickly become my go-to when working with Prismacolors. I don't feel the need to do this as much with Brute Funas or Arrtx pencils, since their more oil-based formulation doesn't blend as dramatically on the page. But because Prismacolors are so soft and, dare I say, smushy, yes, that's totally a legitimate technical term, deepening the shadows at the end really helps add dimension and depth to the coloring. Okay, it is now the next day. I am back after a much needed hand break. My hands were killing me yesterday, but off camera what I've done is added this background here. I just wanted to do a partial background because I really wanted the sleigh and the presents to be the focal point of this page. I did this background with a new set of watercolor pencils that I just received. I'll be talking about those pencils in an upcoming video, so stay tuned for that. I am wondering if this black grey color wasn't the way to go. Should I have done a blue instead? I don't know, but it's done now. I'm thinking though, once I add all the acrylic marker details, it'll all come together, so fingers crossed for that. Before I go in and do the finishing touches though, I just want to do a tinsy bit more pencil work. I'm thinking these Christmas trees, the shadows need to be a little bit deeper to match how deep the shadows are of the presents and the sleigh, and I also want to add some shadows behind the presents on the Christmas tree. So I'm going to quickly go in and do that now, and then we can finally get to using the Simptap markers. Acrylic marker details are my favorite part. You might have noticed that for most of this page, instead of using classic black for the shadows, I opted for a dark brown maroon shade. I actually rarely use black for shadows in my coloring pages. More often than not, I'll reach for a deep brown, purple, or blue instead. I find that these alternative shadow colors create a softer, more natural look, especially in adult coloring. That said, I can occasionally get a little heavy-handed with my shading. When that happens, I grab my trusty colorless blender pencil to smooth out any areas where the shadow work looks too intense. And for a touch of sparkle, I'm using my Pentel glitter gel pen to color the metal parts of the ornaments. Alright team, it's finally time to bring out the Simptap markers that I've been raving about. When I'm working with acrylic markers, I always start with the colored details and save the white acrylic marker for the end. For this page in particular, that's super important since I'll be using the white marker extensively to create a snowy effect. I'm starting with a light blue to color the swirls and embellishments on the sleigh. I applied 2 layers of the blue acrylic to completely erase the line work from the page, and the Simptap markers handled this beautifully. Removing the line work gave the swirls a more 3-dimensional look, and I'm pretty confident I'd have needed way more layers if I'd been using a different marker set. As I mentioned earlier in this video, I'll be making a separate video this month all about how to color snow, but in this video, I thought I'd show you how to create snow effects on your coloring pages. It's seriously so simple. All you need to do is make lots of little white acrylic dots. I place the snow in areas where it would naturally settle in real life, focusing on corners and grooves like at the bottom of the sleigh as you can see here. You can also use this dotting technique to enhance the lighting on your Christmas trees. Use a color that matches the lighting as closely as possible so it blends in subtly, then go over it again with your white acrylic marker. This technique was inspired by the simple and bold coloring styles I've seen on Instagram and TikTok. However, I think it works just as well over colored pencil layers without looking overly cartoony. For the trees, I decided to add some snow using the same dotting method. I like to concentrate the snow at the tips of the branches, focusing on the ones that aren't hidden behind the presents in the center. So this is how the page was looking after I added snow on the top of my presents as well. I didn't film that part because it's just the same repetitive technique I've shown you already, and I'm sure you've got the gist by now. The final step with my white Simptap marker was adding a few snowflakes to the background. This is my favorite way to draw snowflakes. It's super simple and just involves a bunch of intersecting lines. Once I was happy with the number of snowflakes, it was time to go all out with some more white acrylic dots to create a stormy snow blizzard effect. For this, I used 2 different markers. The 3mm bullet tip marker from Arrtx and the 0.7mm paint pen from Posca. If you only have the Simptap markers on hand, don't worry, you can absolutely create varying dot sizes with them as well. However, obviously this method here that I'm showing you is just a little bit more efficient. And there you have it team, that's how I tackle some of the trickier Christmas elements in my coloring pages. I really hope this video was helpful and that you can apply some of these techniques to your own Christmas coloring. And don't forget, if you want to enter my Arrtx giveaway, I'll have all of the details and instructions linked in the description below. In the meantime, happy Christmas coloring friends. Have a good day, have a good life, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!